Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Insider. Today we have a very special guest from Callisto, Tracy DeTomasi, joining us to talk a little bit about what her organization does and how it can support individuals, especially when they're going through some very difficult times as a survivor and a victim of sexual violence. And so, Tracy, I would love for you just to quickly introduce yourself as we get going.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been doing gender-based violence work for about 25 years now. I started my career as a therapist for adolescent sex offenders, and I worked in group homes, mostly with boys for the first 15 years of my career, but also worked with youth who had been sexually trafficked. I ran a domestic violence shelter, and then I started getting into how can we prevent sexual assault and domestic violence from root causes and really changing the culture that really supports this work. And I did a lot of work in getting men involved in ending violence against women. And now I have been at Callisto for 3.5, 4 years. And I really think that this could be a game changer in preventing and addressing sexual violence.
I love everything you just described. Title IX Consulting Group, we are very big on prevention and really looking at those support systems, not just for those that have been victimized, but for those that have been accused and that we find later, were indeed the perpetrators in some very serious cases. So what you've done in your past is really amazing. And I'm glad that you're now, leading the charge through Callisto. Can you share a little bit about what Callisto does?
Yes, so we are a national nonprofit that has built end-to-end encrypted technology to help survivors find out if their perpetrator has harmed someone else. And so that's a lot. So I'll break that down a little bit. A lot of survivors want to know, did the person who harmed me harm somebody else? And that may or may not change their willingness to report. And so we have built this technology and it's end to end encrypted. And what that means is that all of the information that is put into our system is encrypted before it hits our servers. So it's saved in that encrypted state. And what a survivor does is they can go in and enter into matching, and they do that by putting the state where the assault occurred, and that's because sexual assault laws vary by state, and they put in a unique identifier of their perpetrator. So their perpetrator's social media handle, email address, or phone number. There's about 12 different categories that they can put something in, and they can put as many as they know. And that's what we use to match on. And then the survivor consents to be contacted in the event of a match. So if two people put in the same Instagram handle, let's say, there's a match. We're going to be notified, but we're not going to be able to see the survivor information or the perpetrator information because that's still going to be encrypted even to us because we don't want to be a list that you can just sort through. What happens is we can see the state where the assault occurred. We can see any accessibility needs for the survivor, including any language needs that they have. And then we assign that case to an advocate who is trauma informed and vetted by us, and they reach out to the survivors individually. That advocate is free for the survivors to meet with, so there's no cost. And the survivor doesn't have to meet with that advocate, but if they choose to, they will tell them what happened and get their options. So whether that's understanding the criminal system, the civil system, Title IX, mental health, whatever needs that they have, that advocate will help them lay out that option. And that advocate is protected by confidentiality as well. Then, if the survivors are wanting to meet and they all consent to doing so, that advocate will work to connect them after explaining the risks of doing so. And then that's where the survivors can pursue healing and justice, whatever that means for them. We do not report to police. We do not report to Title IX. We do not report to HR. And we do not investigate what happened. So we're not going after the perpetrators. We are really about empowering survivors so they can make the best decisions for them, for themselves. And I think that that's what's really key because a lot of the lists that are out there are people trying to sort through things and they get shut down for defamation. But we are really about survivor empowerment. And we know that if we empower several survivors together to potentially report, and we are completely agnostic about reporting. If you want to, great. If you don't want to, also great. But we know that coming together will increase the likelihood of reporting, which increases the likelihood of accountability.
Under Title IX, no one should be requiring someone to report either. So I love that you just described that, as campus administrators out there throughout K through 12 or higher education. As a quick reminder, no one should be stating, go to the police, you have to report. No one should be stating, file a Title IX case, report, complaint, formal complaint. Neither is required. And instead, resources, support measures should be offered regardless if they report or not. So kudos to you all. I love the fact that you are also saying the same message. And I'm curious if schools and campus administrators are offering your services as one of those supportive measures, as one of those resources for their campus's student population.
It depends. And so I should have said as well that anybody in the US and its territories with a .edu email address has free access. So regardless of if the school and the administration wants to partner with us, students, faculty, staff, alumni, anybody with that .edu has free access. And it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. So the perpetrator can be connected to the school, but doesn't have to be. And I think that that's really key too. And so as far as the question of what do administrators and schools think, it's really a mixed bag. That we have some that are really helpful and they encourage their students to promote it. Some will give us authority to promote it on campus, and they'll put it in their first year orientation and on their website and different resources. And yet we get a lot of pushback too. And that pushback can come in a lot of forms. Sometimes it's we're confused. We think that our students are going to be confused as to whether they report to Title IX or to use Callisto, and they think it's a reporting tool. We don't believe that because we're a neutral third-party nonprofit, just like a rape crisis center. And we believe that survivors know the difference between those things. And we also make it very clear on our website and throughout the tool that we are not reporting, and this is not Title IX, and this is not reporting to your school. And so I think it depends. I think a lot of schools don't want to address sexual assault at all in general. And so promoting a resource that's going to find serial perpetrators could put the schools in jeopardy because it could also show the flaws in the school and how they're not handling these cases in general. One example that I always like to give is Dr. Larry Nassar, who was the USA gymnastics doctor. He was reported to Title IX several times at Michigan State University. He was reported to police in the area, and every one of those reports, he was found not guilty or they went away, and they didn't connect the fact that several survivors had reported him to make that connection that he was a serial perpetrator. And yet, when those survivors found their own voice outside of the systems through a journalist, they were able to connect and find the justice that they deserved. But it took the journalists to do that. And journalists aren't always safe to do that. There is a lot of risk in doing so. And it requires a perpetrator who is of interest to sell a media story. So Larry Nassar was, Harvey Weinstein was, Bill Cosby was, but an average student may not be.
I understand it on the level where it's been something that I've also worked on cases where there's been a lot more attention because of which campus it is. UCLA, USC, Liberty University. And many times that's what starts to happen is the individuals start coming forward. It's in the media, it's on a podcast. Other victims, other survivors hear about it. They start to reach out. And it really has this natural growing effect where all of a sudden you have a strong enough case and you need those individuals to help kind of guide you through what do you do next because the Title IX office didn't help. The police maybe didn't help. So what do you do now? And so I know Title IX Consulting Group, that's an area that we help support, similar to you, different ways, but very similar. And so tell me a little bit about the campuses that do promote your services. How do they work and function with you all when they're not afraid to say this is a resource because we are obviously doing our prevention education portion to educate our population to understand the differences with reporting and calling a resource.
Right. I think the biggest success we have is with students, actually. So a lot of times we have a program called the Student Ambassador Program, and that is students who volunteer to spread the word on their campus. Often they're involved in student groups like Students Against Sexual Assault on their campus. And so they're providing a lot of resources and educating a lot of students about a variety of resources. And Callisto is one of those resources. And what we found is that if they make big enough waves, they get the administration to listen about really endorsing this resource. And that's all we are. We are a resource, no different than a hotline, no different than a rape crisis center. We are a resource, but we keep the information outside of the school. And I think that that's one of the things that the school is worried about, that we are going to expose them, like I said before. But we are willing to work in any way possible with schools. And so sometimes that is providing them information just to clarify what we're doing. Sometimes that is coming in and to do talks. We have a toolkit online that's free that you can download, that you can spread the word no matter who you are. A lot of administrations do that. We work with student government organizations to pass different resolutions about using our services. We work with newspapers, student newspapers, to be able to spread the word about it. And so whatever a school wants to do and however their administration wants to work, we will work with them in the way that's best for them, because we know that every school is different and every school has different needs and different cultures and different understandings and approaches to sexual violence. And we are going to meet them wherever they are at as much as we can to our capacity.
Schools and campuses, they all do very different things. I know that when we've worked with different campuses and we analyze campuses around the country, it's very telling, even when you look at the Clery Act. You look at the annual security report, and there's many campuses out there stating that they have zero stalking cases, zero domestic violence cases, 1 to 2 sexual assault cases in a year, and they might have 30, 20, 10,000 students. Those of us in this field know that's really unlikely of a number. Right?
Absolutely. Well, I
It,
think that was how I got to know what your work was, as I listened to the podcast about Liberty University.
oh, really? Okay, I didn't know
Yes. Uh-huh.
that.
And it was like, yes, of course, because Liberty touted that it was the safest campus in the US, and it's not. And I have said to parents so many times of, if you're going on a college visit with your kids, ask. And if you see that their number is zero, it's not a safe school, because it doesn't mean that it's happening. It's happening everywhere. It's happening beyond college campuses. It's happening in a lot of different places. Anytime that there's power dynamics involved, sexual assault is happening. And it's a matter of how are you addressing it? And the schools with 0 or 2 or 1, they're not addressing it.
That's right. That's right. They actually cause so much concern in me. And I say the same thing to individuals that ask me, oh, do you know anything about this school? Do you know anything about that school? And as an expert witness that works with so many different campuses and campus cases around the country, sometimes I will be able to say behind the scenes, I wouldn't send my kid there. And so it's very concerning when you know that those numbers are too low for the population of students and employees that they have. And the fact is that it's a red flag. It's a red flag that really points to the fact that they are not implementing something correctly. And it takes a lawsuit, unfortunately, many times to
It
begin
does.
begin to take the baby steps towards improving things. And I say baby steps because a lawsuit doesn't change everything overnight.
It doesn't. Yeah. I think that there needs to be an economic incentive for schools to take this seriously. And right now, the economic incentive is to hide it and cover it up or not address it. And that lawsuit is that economic incentive to start to deal with it in some capacity. And like you said, sometimes that works, sometimes that makes some change, but not all the change that's needed.
So I love that you're describing yourselves as a resource because I see you all as a
Yeah.
resource. And I'm a big advocate for ensuring campuses have off-campus resources, on-campus resources. But when you look at those off-campus resources, not just one-sided, of course, the individuals that are accused also need supports too. And so ensuring that there is, something for both sides, because
Mhm.
look at what just happened, the school shooting. At the end of the day, individuals that are perpetrators in one way or another, whether it's sexual violence, school shootings. I've always said it's always connected to sexuality in some way. And they need those resources just as much as everyone else does to help
Yeah.
mitigate, help decrease the outcome of violence and harm caused to others. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. We cannot address sexual violence without addressing the needs of the perpetrator. And I'm not saying the needs of the perpetrator outweigh the needs of the victim by any means at all. They're yes and this is a yes and conversation because we need all of the resources we can get and there's not enough resources for victims. However, when I was a therapist for adolescent sex offenders, people would always say, "Why are you doing this work?" And I said, "Because this is the way to prevent sexual violence." Because all of the kids that I worked with had multiple victims. And if we can stop a perpetrator and we can teach them how to understand their behavior, particularly when they're young and they don't understand potentially don't understand what's happening or don't have any coping mechanisms to do anything about it, then we're going to actually prevent it. And if locking away, locking somebody away is the only option, that is definitely an option. And I don't want to say that it's not, but there has to be other ones, or it's incarceration and treatment at the same time. And I think that having empathy for an offender doesn't excuse what they've done. It
Right.
is not an excuse of what they've done, but it is necessary in order to prevent it from happening again.
Amen. Exactly right. And it's a big, I mean, here we are, we're singing to the choir between the two of us, but it's so true. My career started leaving undergrad, thinking I was going to go to law school, and I worked for a criminal defense attorney for 8 years. And so the bulk of cases I worked on were all the juvenile cases, the adult cases, molesters, rapists. And so I was the individual that was interviewing, reviewing the police reports, and looking at, what is that strategic defense that you do for these folks? And I would come up with the ideas and the plans, be in those brainstorming sessions. And that's where I began to learn and really began to understand that the prevention, yes, 100% needs to be done for the victim, but there needs to be something more for the perpetrators because there are moments in time where you will be able to stop something from getting and escalating to a point where we don't want it to go.
Yeah.
And even after the perpetration, to think about can they be rehabilitated if they're 12?
Right.
Can they be rehabilitated if they're 5? I have seen these cases. I'm sure you have too. And so I think the answer would be obvious, but it's not always obvious to individuals out there. And
Yeah.
so we do need to think about those services for both sides. And, I really like the fact that you're coming from that place of understanding that as the leader of Callisto.
Yeah, I think, I don't think that everybody does come from this perspective, but starting my career where I did so many years ago, it shaped that of the number one person responsible for an offense is the perpetrator. That's it. There's a lot of reasons of how they get around that, and there's people that help them do it for sure, but it's always the perpetrator. And we think about risk assessments. A lot of the times the risk assessments for gender-based violence are what's the risk of the victim? What's their likelihood of being assaulted? They can't control whether they're assaulted at all.
Right.
You cannot control that. You can do things that maybe reduce your risk, but why is the risk factor? Why are we not doing assessments on the person that's identified as creepy, as we don't like this behavior, even if they're reported and nothing was found out? Why are we not doing a risk assessment on that perpetrator and finding and creating new risk assessments for the perpetrator, even if they haven't actually perpetrated? And I think that that is necessary. If somebody's accused of sexual assault at a school, there should be a risk assessment for that person being accused to see the likelihood that they would offend. And we're not doing that. And that's not how things work a lot of the times. And I think that that is very problematic because one of the things I always say is that if I'm at a party and I get blackout wasted 10 times and I'm not assaulted, Drinking isn't my problem. If I'm assaulted one time when I'm blackout wasted, it's because I'm in the presence of a perpetrator who wanted to assault me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's it.
That's
And
right.
sure, maybe if I wasn't blackout wasted, I wouldn't have gotten assaulted, but it means he would have assaulted somebody else. So that's not preventing sexual assault. It's reducing your individual risk. But for schools and administrators, the risk is still the same because they're still going to have that assault is still going to occur. It's just going to occur with a different person.
That's right. And I think the fact that Callisto looks at these serial perpetrators is key because many times on these campuses, that prevention education is not happening. The behavior might be escalating, or individuals believe, you know what, they didn't care if I stalked this person. So now I'm going to go ahead and start touching over here.
Yep.
And they didn't care about this. So now I'm going to go ahead and get someone roofied and rape them. And I
Yep.
think I'll be okay because I'm really close to the admin at this point and they love me. Um, and so I think that's where schools tend to not realize that by not addressing the issues and not promoting resources like yours because they're afraid of it,
Yeah.
it's really hurting our communities and our population from fighting this horrible thing we keep calling rape culture. But it's true. It's these serial perpetrators that are causing the harm. A serial perpetrator doesn't mean, just for everyone listening to me, I'm not saying a serial perpetrator is someone that has raped 10 times. I'm calling a serial perpetrator at this point someone that stalked, sexually harassed, and then sexually assaulted. They affected, let's just say it was an individual each time, three people already. And that's going to scar them. It's not necessarily that they raped three times, but they have definitely impacted someone with trauma that they now need to recover the rest of their lives. And so I think Callisto addressing that serial perpetrator aspect is genius.
Yeah. Well, one of the things how we were created was our founder is Jess Ladd, and she was a victim of sexual assault on a college campus. And she started looking at how can we prevent sexual assault on college campuses. And the research that she found said that 90% of sexual assaults on college campuses are committed by serial perpetrators who, on average, offend 6 times in college. So if we can get two people together, two of the same victims together, and accountability can happen after that, and it prevents the other four from happening, that reduces college sexual assault by 59%. And of course, two is too many, one is too many. But in our systems right now, one person doesn't always have a case. They say it's he said, she said. They say that, oh, that happened behind closed doors. There's no evidence. Oh, it was consensual if you do have evidence. And so it really takes seeing that pattern to be able to get any type of accountability. And I hope we change that. I really, really do. And it also shouldn't rely or rest on the victims to come forward to have accountability either, because I I don't if you don't want to report, I don't think that you should report because reporting can be very, very traumatic. And that's why we are out of that reporting system, is to give people options without having to go through those trauma inducing systems that aren't meant to help survivors. And they're certainly not meant to help survivors of color or LGBTQ folks or folks with disabilities. They're even worse for those. And those folks also experience sexual assault at an even higher rate. And so it's all protecting those perpetrators. And we need to make changes.
One thing that I know I'm a big advocate for is something I reference to as friendly warnings for campus administrators to provide. Many times you don't get that formal complaint, but yet you know that there's behaviors that is questionable, beginning to kind of cross that boundary. So my question always is to campus administrators, why are you waiting until it escalates? Why
Exactly.
do we wait until that point to try to like intervene and or address something that is already of concern? Because it's not rape, because it's not extreme to what you want to categorize as horrible. I'm not sure how you see that or if you've seen campus
I
administrators say things like that. But it's fascinating at times.
I completely agree. I think that we want to, what happens is we shove that first behavior under the rug, and then we shove the second behavior under the rug, and then we're shoving sexual assault under the rug, and we're minimizing that and all of that. I used to do talks on college campuses about 10 years ago in a different position. And one of the slides that I used was there was maybe about 8, 10 years ago, there were some fraternities that had these signs hanging out of their fraternity houses that said, drop off your daughter here and your mom too. And that was problematic. That was the start. And everybody accepted that as funny, as okay. The schools didn't shut them down. There were people that were complaining in the media, but it was like, oh, it's no big deal. But that is connected because now if I am a student and I'm a girl in college that goes to one of those parties and I get assaulted, it's going to be, well, what did you expect? You saw the sign. And now all of a sudden it's my fault and I'm the dumb one for going to that party. And so it's all connected and it's all that rape culture that we have to deal with. And there, again, we should have assessments of, this person's behavior. Maybe it's just action, like maybe it's just jokes and maybe it's just misogynistic views or whatnot. But if you can address that, it helps that perpetrator, potential perpetrator from even offending and gets them help so they're not going to ruin their own lives and I'm going to put ruin in quotes, real big quotes there, but ruin their own lives to go to jail or to be kicked out of campus or for whatever for offending. It helps them too. And I think that we're missing that point because violence isn't good for anybody, particularly for the big victims, of course. I don't want to misconstrue that at all. But it's not good for the perpetrators either.
Right. No. We just completed our summer series trainings, and one of the sessions was specifically on, again, one of my favorite topics, which is these friendly warnings where it doesn't necessarily fit in the boxes of Title IX for campuses of informal resolution, formal resolution. And so I really brought up those are not the only two options.
Right.
Can have these friendly warnings that, I've done them myself, and they can be strong conversations of warning. If you do not stop this behavior and it escalates, A, B, and C can happen to your education and or career.
Yep.
I'm not accusing you of anything. There hasn't been a formal complaint of anything. I am here giving you this friendly warning, this warning, as someone that's looking out for you too.
Yep.
Because I don't want you to get into that trouble. Just like I don't want the individual to be harmed, traumatized, victimized, but also looking out for you too from going down a path that you don't want to go down. And it was interesting, Tracy, I'm sure you've seen this in the training. Several coordinators, settlement coordinators stated they had never heard of that option before. And,
I'm not
after
surprised by that at all.
Yeah, but it was so interesting to me. After the training, I was reflecting with one of the attorneys on my team, and we were just talking about it. And I said, it's so interesting. It's, if we're a parent, you're teaching your child how to behave every day, right? Are we going to wait till they get ran over by a car until we tell them, be careful, look both ways? Or are we telling them, hey, be careful, look both ways, because you can get hit by a car, you can potentially get hurt. And so it was just interesting how, yeah, unless campuses are being told specifically, you have another option. You can give a warning just like you would to your own child. They're not doing it. And they're not
And
even
that's a great
thinking,
metaphor. Great metaphor.
thank you. And they're not even thinking about doing it. And so that just kind of blew my mind. And I do recognize I've never seen that training done by anyone else. And, here we are doing our first summer series, and I'm trying to think up different approaches of addressing certain issues on campuses. And So we put this one out there, and I think it's going to become one of my favorite new trainings because we
Yeah.
need to teach these things. And like you said earlier, it's not that we're not thinking about survivors. This is because we are thinking
Are
about.
exactly. It's because we are thinking about survivors. Exactly. I think that that's part of the issue of the system is that prevention on college campuses has become bystander intervention when it's proven time and time again that it doesn't really work because it doesn't really address the power dynamic. If I am a quiet, shy person that this is like my family has never like I'm a first generation college student, I can't stand up to the coach when I'm on a scholarship. I can't do that. And I can't stand up to the captain of the football team. And I can't stand up to, anybody with charisma or whatever, maybe because I'm shy. Like it doesn't work in those bystander interventions. And those bystander interventions assume assault is happening. We're not actually trying to prevent the assault. We're trying to intervene in an assault that's happening, which are two different things. And we need to change all of that.
Yeah, going back to that metaphor, bystander intervention, which of course I am a proponent of when it's the only option, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
And so when it's the only option because campuses don't recognize what else they can do. Um, However, if you recognize that there's more you can do, when you think about bystander intervention, what you're really doing is you're not teaching the kids to look both ways when a car is coming. Instead, you're telling every single pedestrian on the street, look out for all the kids in case they start running out there
Yep.
because you need to step in and save them.
Yep.
That's what bystander intervention is.
Exactly.
And if we did that as a society, we'd have tons of kids being ran over every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. I always use the waterfall for prevention, that metaphor of for so long we were just pulling people out of the waterfall as they were falling down and some didn't make it and we did as much as we could and then somebody was going like how can we make this safer? So we give them life preservers and life, like the jackets and kayaks or whatever for them to safely fall down the waterfall. But it still assumes they're going to fall down the waterfall and it still assumes people are going to get hurt. And it's just making it a little bit safer. And that's what bystander intervention does. But what we really need to do is go upstream and figure out how can we prevent people from even getting close to the waterfall or even getting in the river or being pushed in the river, and that's what you and I are trying to do. And we're trying to learn from those who did fall off the waterfall.
That's right. That is right. Tracy, I want to switch gears a little bit. I've noticed that Jess Michaels is on your website. We've all been hearing, all the buzz about the Jeffrey Epstein files and whose names are on there. And I don't expect you to know all that kind of an answer. That's not where I'm headed with this. Um, but where I am headed though is, with this serial perpetrator theme, and thinking about the Epstein files, curious how you see that having a strong connection with Jess Michaels, um, and where does Callisto fall in line with all of that?
Yeah, so Jess Michaels has become a very dear friend of mine. And I am going to share this story with her permission. She got involved with Callisto because of her own experience being an Epstein survivor. So she was raped by Jeffrey Epstein in 1991, and she was going to a job interview with him to be a massage therapist. She was not trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell or any of that, but she easily could have been. Um, what she did was what many trauma survivors do, especially in that time. She shut down. She lost a ton of weight. She quit her career as a professional dancer, who she was dancing with MC Hammer and Aretha Franklin. Like she was big. And she became a shell of herself until 2018 when she was scrolling her feed and she saw his face on her feed. And she said, that was the man that raped me. She didn't know his name. And it was an article by Julie K. Brown, I think is her name, out of the Miami Herald, who had written this expose about the sweetheart deal that Epstein got for trafficking minors. And Jess went back to her day planner from 1991 that she had kept, and she had his name. She had his location, she had all of it, and she said that was the man that raped me. And she tells me that that was the day her healing began. That she thought before that she was the only one, that it was her fault, she shouldn't have gone, all the things that so many survivors say, especially starting from the 90s when we didn't know that freeze was a trauma response at that point, or it wasn't well known at that point. And she thinks about what if she would have been able to have a resource like Callisto and she were able to connect, because connecting to other survivors and knowing that that perpetrator harmed other people was actually really liberating for her. Even though it was awful and tragic and she wished that nobody else had to experience it, it was also, excuse me, it was also really liberating because it took any responsibility that she had out of the equation. She was no longer responsible because everything that he did was really, really calculated. Um, and I think that that is the power of Callisto, because another thing that she said in her TED Talk, and I would encourage everybody to go watch her TED Talk, is that you listen to her because she names Epstein as the perpetrator, but it could be anybody. And any survivor has the same feelings, but we care when we think that the perpetrator is a really terrible person. And it takes a long time for that person to be deemed, like, to be demonized, right? And so it took the media wanting to do an expose on him because of who he was. Most perpetrators, the media is not going to care because it's not going to sell a story. And I think that that is, she recognizes that her story shouldn't be unique. And that's why she wants to help other survivors, because she knew what it felt like to not be a unique survivor for so long until she was 30 years after the assault happened. And that's why she tells her story. And that's why she is making sure that others are inspired by her, because it took, she talks about um, the other survivors who came forward for that article, that they changed her life. And without them, she would not have come forward. And without her seeing that, she would not have come forward. And she would have just continued to still be in that trauma. And I think we are giving people the opportunity to do that so much. And that's important because we can't have journalists doing this work. It's not safe. And any survivor should be able to get that opportunity to find this information out, regardless of who their perpetrator is.
Yeah, absolutely true. I know that in working with the Liberty University survivors, I know that you've worked and met with Heather Wendell. She's mentioned your name to me.
Mhm.
Um, and we did a podcast last season together. And it was a very touchy moment in the podcast, but something that I know firsthand because I know all the survivors and I've worked with them very closely is the fact that by pulling so many individuals together, they became their almost like a backbone for each other.
Yeah.
And it really is such a strengthening opportunity when you have others right next to you to hold your hand and cry with, talk with, be silent with, that truly understand what happened and what went wrong on a level that others just would not understand. And when you have been perpetrated against, whether it's by an institution that wasn't there for you and re-victimized you, or perpetrated against by the same rapist, the same sexual assaulter, um, it would be the same thing, because it's having a tribe of survivors together that can validate what you've been through. And in many ways, it's sad for the individuals that think that they aren't individuals alone, that no one else knows what they go through because no one else has had the same perpetrator, where more than likely they do have someone else out there that has been
Mhm.
perpetrated against by the same individual, by the same campus. And I say campus because what happens is that sometimes we have these dark communities of higher education or K through 12 that cover up these situations. And unfortunately, allow for victimization to happen. And so students, parents, employees tend to become a victim of not just a perpetration of someone that sexually assaults them, but then also a victim of a campus that now has also tried to wipe them silent.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important to say for people that are listening to this is that, and we said it before, but survivors shouldn't be responsible. So if you didn't report and the person who harmed you continued to harm other people, it's not your fault. It
Mhm.
is absolutely not your fault. And I think that a lot of people blame that survivor of, if you would have just reported. Well, you know what? People reported Larry Nassar and nothing happened. People reported Harvey Weinstein and nothing happened. People reported a lot of different perpetrators and nothing happened. And that's because, like you just said, the schools are the other entity that are responsible for it continuing. And if they would have stepped in and held somebody accountable when somebody did report, because by the time you get to numerous perpetrators, somebody is typically reported.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that's key. So reporting doesn't, most of the time, still doesn't have accountability. And so it's not the responsibility to prevent a serial perpetrator from offending again if you are the victim. It is not, so I just want to make sure that all of anybody who's in that situation releases themselves of that guilt, because I know a lot of people have it, but it's not their fault.
Absolutely not their fault. Never their fault. It's also not their fault when a campus doesn't support you, when a campus ignores you, if a campus tries to cover it up. None of that is your fault. That's the type of work that we do, that we've seen, and unfortunately, we've seen that. Um, so I'm curious. I know that Jess Michaels, was she a student? Since your services are mainly for .edus, correct? Or
Yeah, she was not a student. I mean, she was 22 and a professional dancer. But she sees the power of it, and she sees the power for that age group because she could have been a student, you know? And so she just believes in what we're doing. And right now, yes, we are focused in academia with anybody with a .edu having free access, but we are looking to expand. And the only thing really that's preventing us from expanding is funding. Fundraising in the space for sexual assault is really complex. Um, and we don't get a lot of funding. And right now in 2025, a lot of funding has been cut, both federally, and different foundations are changing how they're providing funding. And sexual assault organizations are really hitting a very difficult time. And so she believes in it, and she believes that if we continue to make it successful on college campuses, that we can continue to expand where other people will have access. But she wants to help survivors no matter where they're at, if they've been assaulted on a college campus, if they haven't been, because she knows that power of connecting it.
And that's so true. I mean, the victimization goes outside of the school system. Although
Mhm.
within the school system, I think there are many potential safeguards that can be seen there. I say potential because although you would think schools will want to protect everyone and listen and support and investigate and do all the right things, unfortunately, that's not always the case. And so that's where Title IX kind of comes into play, especially to try to create some accountability when there's no accountability. I love the fact that you all are going to hopefully expand. I think that is so important on a national and global scale. Um, is there anything else you'd like to
Yeah,
share?
I mean, I think that, we've had success. We have matches, about every 40 entries experiences a match. Um, and we need more people to know about it. 21 million people have access, and 21 million people don't know they have access. And that requires being on podcasts like yours, and for people to share our posts. People say, what can I do? Follow us on Instagram at Callisto and share, because you don't know who's watching. You don't know who's listening. You don't know that person that you never thought was assaulted has been assaulted, and now they know a resource because of you. And don't be shy about that, because that gives us traction. That gives the algorithm traction for us to get to other people. And people don't want to follow an account about sexual assault. They want to follow kittens and puppies and viral dances. And following a sexual assault account can be really triggering. for a lot of people. And so if you have the capacity to do that, follow us and share, or download our free toolkit on our website, or tell 5 friends about us. That can really, really help get the word out so we can spread the word so more and more people know that they have access. So more and more people that are using it, the more matches that we'll get, and the more accountability we'll have, and the more healing we'll have for survivors.
For the .edu, does this go also for K through 12? Do you all provide
Is
services for K through 12?
We don't provide services for K through 12 because of mandated reporting laws.
Mm.
We haven't figured out how to do that legally and safely for children, because we don't want either parents putting the names of children and not protecting that child, or children just don't always know how to make that decision, particularly for younger kids. We want to look into that. Again, it comes down to funding and having capacity to really explore that option. But right now, there's so much to do for over 18, and there's more resources at times for children who have been assaulted and child sexual abuse rather than adult sexual abuse. So that's where our focus is right now.
What about for employees on campuses?
If they've got a .edu, they've got access. Yeah.
Okay.
And I should also say, we don't define sexual assault. We allow survivors to say, if you felt violated, you can enter into matching. We don't actually ask what happened. We do have an incident log where you can document what happened, and it's saved in that encrypted state, and the only person who ever has access is the person with the password. But you don't have to say what happened to you. So if you aren't sure if it was sexual assault, you can enter in, and people worry about it being like, oh, that's false reporting. It's not, because it's not going anywhere. We're not reporting it anywhere, and nobody has access to it, and nobody can hack into our system and find it. It's if there's a match, then to your point earlier of, did that escalate? Is that a pattern? Maybe it is actual sexual assault and you just didn't identify it as so, because so many people we know that they don't know if they've been sexually assaulted or not, because they're thinking it's a stranger rape and somebody's going to jump out behind a bush, but when in reality it's your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your trusted professor or your trusted coach that is doing these things. And so you can enter into it not knowing, and if there's a match, then you can explore that with the counselor or the advocate that is assigned to you to say, I don't even know if this does reach criminal sexual assault, and it might not, but we don't report it. So that's still all protected under confidentiality. So there's still no false accusations with our system.
Okay. And the individuals, they get connected to speak to one another, or is that only through a
If
counsel?
they choose to, if they choose to, only they have to sign a consent, and only if they want to. There's no pressure to connect if they don't want to. We also go over the risks of connecting, of could it impact your case? We once your name is out there to another person, we cannot guarantee confidentiality anymore. And so we go through those risks with the survivor. But if they make that choice to say, yes, I want to connect, then they can do that, and they can have the agency to do that as long as everybody agrees.
Okay. Very empowering. I think that that is a very empowering position that you all place individuals in. And I think it's amazing. I think it's great. I think it's something that all survivors globally should have access to. And so I'm happy that higher ed has it. I hope that one day it is for everyone, because as we both know, there are victims and survivors all over the place. And I think many times individuals need more answers than what they're given, and to be kind of given a little bit more of insight as to what happened to them, I think can happen more when someone else is connected with them. So I think I think what you all do is great. So thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being on our podcast. And I'm glad that we are building a collaborative relationship with you all.
I agree. Yeah. Thank you for having me and spreading the word. And if your listeners want to find out more, go to projectcallisto.org or follow us on Instagram at Callisto.
Great. And everyone out there, if you've enjoyed today, please ensure to subscribe to us, like us, leave some comments. We will love to respond to you all. And with that, we look forward to continuing the second season with some amazing guests. Tracy, thank you again. And bye, everyone. We'll see you soon.